Until a short time ago, here in Nisibin, known today as Nusaybin, an inscription was to be found on the walls of this church, recording the date 359 AD, which means that Saint Ephrem himself might have seen it being built, since he was still living in Nisibin at the time. We searched for the inscription in vain in the church dedicated to Saint Jacob of Nisibin, another great Syriac saint that welcomed us in the empty silence of its splendid desolation. In Aleppo's new cathedral, one of the countless Syrian Orthodox churches dedicated to Saint Ephrem, the remarkable modern frescoes are influenced by the rich Syriac culture, whose greatest figures were Bardaisan, known as the Aramaean philosopher, who died in 222 AD, the poets Balai, Narsai, and Jacob of Seruj, along with authors such as John the Solitary, Philoxenus of Mabuch, Sergius of Rishaina, and John of Ephesus, all belonging to the 5th and 6th centuries, followed in the 7th century by such men as Severus Sebokht, Jacob of Edessa, and Isaac of Nineveh, or Isaac the Syrian. These were followed in later centuries by great scholars such as Mushe bar Kifo, Dionysius bar Salibi, the patriarch Michael the Great, and culminating in the polymath Gregorius bar Ebroio in the 13th century. Included among these illustrious figures, naturally, is Saint Ephrem. Late antiquity, especially from the 3rd to the 5th centuries, was a period of hermits, ascetics, and monks. The remote, often inaccessible places that these mad followers of God inhabited seem impossibly inhospitable to us in the 21st century. These men cut themselves off intentionally from the rest of the world, and the only way to find traces of them is by following goat tracks. This is Wadi Kadisha, the Lebanese Holy Valley, where there are many remains of Syriac monasteries and hermit dwellings that blossomed during that age of great mystical fervor. However, these men, who were commonly referred to as the recluses, did not embrace a life of extreme sacrifice out of an abstract love of God, an elitist need for isolation, or an egotistical life of contemplation. In 313 AD, the Edict of Constantine sanctioned the end of the persecutions and marked the beginning of freedom of worship for Christians. Being a Christian was no longer synonymous with imprisonment, torture, and death. But many members of the Church yearned to belong to the world of martyrdom of the early Christians. They yearned to be martyrs themselves, determined to sacrifice their lives in order to bear witness of their faith. This is why they made their heroic choice and subjected themselves to what was widely considered absurd hardship and deprivation. A hermit monk wishing to found a monastery would choose a cave big enough to contain a church. The presence of a freshwater spring nearby was indispensable. For several years, such a monk would live alone in the cave, praying and awaiting the arrival of fellow monks who would join him of their own free will, together with others who responded to his invitation. When the group was big enough, everyone worked together to build the church. Subsequently, the monastery would be built. Each monk was assigned his own cave, some accessible only by rope or ladder, in which he lived a life of prayer and solitude until the end of his days. Every Sunday, the monks gathered in the monastery to take the Eucharist, to receive orders from their superior, and to collect a ration of bread, water, and oil. Each monk might also have had a goat to provide milk and cheese. When they were old or ill, monks too weak to reach the monastery would be assigned younger monks who would see to their needs and nurse them until their final hour. Ikos Ayas, once a Syriac monastery, is still inhabited today. It contains a typical example of a cave church. The cave seems to offer a protective embrace and, in some places, is incorporated into the building itself. A few other active monasteries can still be found in this part of northern Lebanon, known as the Mountain of the Primitive City, and today called Wadi Kadisha, or the Sacred Valley. There are three dioceses of the Syrian Orthodox Church in Lebanon: the Diocese of Beirut, the Diocese of Mount Lebanon, and the Diocese of Zakhle. Together with believers from different countries, the faithful who live here often visit the Holy Valley, following in the footsteps of the countless pilgrims who have passed through here over the centuries on their way to the Holy Land. One of the most popular destinations is still the monastery of Ikos Ayas and its original place of worship dedicated to Saint Anthony, who was considered a specialist in healing mental illnesses. Curiosity brings many tourists here to see where the mentally ill were healed long ago, and the high caves where the most dangerous cases were held in chains. But most visitors come here to express their faith. Entire families will light a votive candle and pray together, to give thanks for answered prayers or to ask for grace, to pray for the health of a family member or for the success of a project. Barren women pray for children, and unmarried women pray for a husband. Examples of simple devotion that always demand respect. From Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, it's not difficult to reach Ferzol Mountain, with its rock face punctuated by 6 levels of pre-Christian cave tombs that were taken over centuries later by Syriac monks and transformed into dwellings. Evidence of a pagan past is everywhere, in symbols of Phoenician divinities, and in cells where bloody sacrifices were offered. Visitors can almost identify with the spirits of those who, for love of Christ, chose to live as recluses in these tombs.